is the fallout from the whole Nasser incident and everything that's happened after that.
Exactly.
Very
You know,
much.
Athlete A was just on TV recently, so it's like
Yeah.
I just don't want to get that, icky feel. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna let them, come in. So, okay, guys, I'm going to start. So hold on one second. Our screen is going to disappear for a second.
We're good.
We're good to go. Hello, and thank you for joining us on Coaches on Couches 12, July 2nd, 9 p.m. We're on a Thursday because of the 4th of July weekend. Today, we have a very, very interesting conversation. It's called The Coach's Road to Learning, Education, Assessment, and Development, or developing. So basically, what does a coach do to keep learning their skills, educating themselves, learning how to assess things, and develop their own technical spotting skills and their own technique and style of coaching? I have a wonderful panel here of 4 esteemed coaches, all in respective different parts of their life, who have worked with me before. So I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you personally. Before that, just remember to have your microphone on mute and your video off. Please stay on topic. If you have any questions, directly send it to me through the chat to John Min. We'll talk about some other stuff a little bit later. And then next week is going to be a great panel. It's called The Beauty and the Beam. 4 wonderful coaches are going to discuss Beam, Tammy Biggs, Mary Lee Tracy, Christy Phillips, and Tammy Salciano. And that will be next week at our regular time on Friday, 8 to 9 p.m. So let's jump right in. And first, let's introduce John. Please tell us about yourself, a little background, John.
Okay. Quite honestly, I've been either a gymnast or coaching for 50 years now. So I'm at the extreme end of the spectrum. Early 80s, I coached at Bridgettes. I was a head coach there. We had kids. We had some kids compete internationally for the U.S., so we were national team. I was JO chairman when we changed the compulsories, or the compulsory system, I should say. And I've been hanging out and doing stuff, lectures at Congress and whatever ever since. So, a little bit of a background. Oh. And I'm vice chairman of the USECA.
Yes. Yes. John and I are colleagues with USECA, the United States Elite Coaches Association, which is an association designed to promote and educate and help coaches all throughout the nation. So if you're not a member of USECA, please join us. Next, we have Aaron Minsky from Michigan. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I started coaching competitively about 6 years ago in New Jersey. I started off from scratch with an Excel team that I handpicked the athletes myself, and I knew nothing at all. I just wanted more. I wanted to coach at higher levels because prior to that, I'd been doing rec classes for 5 years. So I wanted like a higher challenge. I wanted to bring a set group of kids up. And so I decided to start the team. And from there, my love for coaching blossomed, and I got into the JO system. I've worked at 5 different gyms now, so I have a lot of different experience with cultures and atmospheres. I've worked with all of these gentlemen here, so I've learned a lot from them too. And I finally achieved a big goal of mine. I'm a head coach here now at a program in Michigan for the girls team. So I'm excited to put all the knowledge I've gained towards that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Coach James, you're next.
Hello, I'm James. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, sorry. So I was a gymnast up and through high school at 11th grade. And then in 2013, I started coaching, primarily rec classes, as there wasn't a team at the gym that I coached for. That's where I met Chris, also on the board. And together, over the years, we developed a team, girls team. A couple of years after that, we developed the boys team, a very successful one at that. And then I teamed up with John at Magma. And though I haven't been coaching for the past year and a half or so, maybe 2 years, still one of his confidants and still going through the venture together with him.
Thank you, James. And last but not least, Coach Chris, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Ostra. I have had the pleasure to work with all of these gentlemen on the panel tonight. I would say that my my involvement in I almost said field. My involvement in gymnastics has spanned virtually my entire life. I was on the last Shields gymnastics boys team, which ended in 1996. Uh, I brought myself up through the competitive program. I'm probably one of the one of the taller gymnasts, probably one of the tallest you've ever seen. As far as that goes, I've worked in both men's and women's gymnastics. I have been a program director. I have been a coach, an athlete, a judge for both men and women. I'll put it this way. Gymnastics has always just kind of made sense to me. It's always been a remaining part of my life. I've met a whole lot of really wonderful people, and it keeps me I'll put it this way. It keeps me in a state of learning all the time. And I can never, ever tell what's going to happen next. I can always rely on a surprise.
Thank you so much. So these four gentlemen are, like I said, are coaches in various aspects of their life, different ages of careers, different backgrounds, but I've had the privilege to work with all four of them. And I have to say, I admire them. I do admire them. They're constantly wanting to learn. They're constantly wanting to progress. Most of them, I know them through like conferences and congresses and lectures and coaching together. And I just love their inspiration and their desire to want to keep improving. So we're going to discuss that aspect of learning to become a better coach. And trust me, I've been coaching for a long time, and I'm one of those coaches that always feels I need to keep getting better. I need to become a better coach. You know, I don't know whether it was competitiveness in the beginning, you know, I want to be as good as them, whether it's a concept of trying to get my athletes safer and better, but it's just an internal fire that's been driving me my entire life to become a better coach. So here's the interesting aspect. I'm going to direct this to the panel. Do you feel that becoming a good coach, and there are different paths, one path, of course, is being a gymnast, and then just learning it through that proxy phase. You know, you're a gymnast, you learn the techniques, you become a coach. What's kind of ironic about that, of course, is that we're all male. We're male coaches. So none of us did beam or you know, floor dance or uneven bars. So how did we become men's coaches? The other avenue, of course, is an apprenticeship. Getting under the wing of someone, you know, like going to a camp and training under, you know, Bella Caroli or someone like that, and just learning, and then you can be another background. And then there's the third, which I find the most difficult, and quite frankly is the way I did it, is going through the technical route, studying videos, studying books, studying manuals, going to congresses, you know, asking people, you know, because no one really took me under the wing. And of course, I was never a high-level gymnast. I was just a class gymnast at the very lowest level. So I never really achieved anything high. My background was more in martial arts. So John Wiltshire, I'd like to go to you first. But between those three, tell us which one you kind of did, which one do you promote, or which one do you think is the best avenue, or if it's like a mix of things. All yours. So unmute yourself. You got it.
Sorry about that. I forgot to unmute myself. That got me? Okay.
Yes.
Actually, I think all three are valid. I mean, I started out, I didn't know what gymnastics was. And 1970, I went to high school, and I went to the only Catholic boys high school in the state of New Jersey that had a gymnastics team. If that wasn't an act of God, I don't know what is. But I got started there, all right? And that developed my love for it. I mean, I just what I
You're breaking up a little bit, John.
Did a little bit club team at Rutgers in college, but there I met the all right, and I, you know, so, and then I learned from them. I learned from a bunch of people there. Went to clinics with them. Learned from a gentleman named Doug Haver. I remember one clinic sort of took me under his wing. I spent like the 2 days with him for the most part, and he taught me some technique and how to, you know, spotting different things, especially from the girls' end. Went to clinics, did a lot of reading. I actually had a whole bunch of things here I was going to show you, but we don't have the time. But I think it's a shame because I don't think the technical journals are that good. So you can't see this, but this is an article by Jerry George in Gymnast Magazine. And I forgot the year, but it's like 1974. It's like Stalders. Okay. And then later on, I mean, a whole bunch of things. You got stuff from Bill Sands. You got, you know, Jerry George's books, everything. You know, so you're reading, it's a mix. It's a little bit of everything. Now the nice thing is you've got so much stuff available to you on the internet, on YouTube, on different videos. But the only thing you have to watch is sometimes you've got to watch the technique and make sure it's appropriate for the kids or their skill. Because a lot of times, you know, you got somebody, and it's a good drill, but maybe it's a little too advanced for where they stand. So you have to also know the sport a little bit and understand when I have an old Snoopy cartoon. So sometimes it's never too late to learn, but sometimes it's too early. And that's exactly it. Okay. It's never too late to learn a skill, but sometimes you can start teaching
Too
it.
early. I agree.
Or part of it too soon when the kid's not ready for it, either physically or mentally or something, or doesn't have enough.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're going to move on. Coach James, I'd like you to kind of address the similar question and your opinions.
Sure. So back when I was a competitive gymnast in high school, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess at the time, my coach, who was a predominantly women's coach, really took a back seat to coaching our team. And so it was left up to myself and one of the other more advanced individuals on the team to sort of, you know, lead the other gymnasts on the team. And so what was available to us was books at the time. We didn't really have, you know, the internet wasn't big. So I was constantly going out to the library, checking out books and reading about the technical aspect of performing the skills. So fast forward then to 2013, when I started getting into coaching, you know, knowing how to do the skills is okay, but knowing how to instruct the skill is totally different. And so in preparation for that, my first job, again, I was hitting the books, going online, watching videos, and sort of what John was saying, being careful though as to what I chose and how I then decided to instruct it, because, you know, one way does not work across the board. And one technique might not be the best technique to, you know, to proven technique either. So you pick and choose, you know, you be selective about what you're wanting to teach. But hands down, I think, you know, that gives you a good foundation, but going to hands-on clinics are, in my mind, a must. You know, if you're going to do this professionally long-term, you have to go, you know, W2, W3, and so on, you know, go to the congresses, and just be there in person, get your hands dirty. And that's the best for me anyway, a hands-on approach. And because there's no substitution for the spotting that way. It's just, you go to the gym, you can read all you want and kind of get a feel for it, but having that environment, that kind of safe environment to practice your spotting is invaluable.
One of my close friends, we used to coach over at Parkettes. He actually said, Coach West, he's out in Arizona. He actually said to me, you know, you can study as many books, diagrams, videos as you want, but you learn the most from actually the girls, spotting them, learning from them, making the mistakes with them, seeing what works and doesn't work. I mean, it really is that kind of hands-on approach. And it's kind of funny because I remember what John was saying, I would go to like a national clinic, and then you'd have this elite level coach or this Russian coach and go, you would do this, 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 perfect skill. And I would go back to the gym and do this, 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 and they crash. And I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? You know? So it doesn't quite work as easily as you think. If it did, we'd all have elite gymnasts, you know, in our gym or winning championships and stuff.
John, could I jump in just to
Of course, Chris, go, please.
Just to piggyback off of what James has said. I mean, you guys know, but I'll tell everyone who's here. During the day, I'm a college professor, or that's one of the hats that I wear. But you hear a phrase in academia a lot that goes something like this. You can't learn to swim at a library. And the idea is it just piggybacks on what James was referring to in terms of practical application, in terms of allowing oneself. Yes, if you can absorb knowledge and information, I love to read. And once I read something, I very rarely forget it. As far as that goes. However, learning, especially because this is a very hands-on sport, learning to spot and learning to identify, a part of this is just learning how to identify what's right and what's wrong with your kid, in terms of their skills, of course. But what I'm saying is the more practical application and experience you can get here, by far, the better. I'll end it right there.
Actually, let's segue into that, talking about spotting. And John Wojcik mentioned too about going to camps. I think camps are a fantastic way to really hone your spotting skills, because first of all, you're dealing with kids that you don't normally work with, and you're dealing with various levels. Aaron, have you ever gone to a camp to learn to spot? How did you develop your spotting techniques? Just unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I went to my first Congress in 2015, and it was a national Congress, which was amazing. It was like a dream come true for me.
Indianapolis, baby.
Yep, exactly.
Yep.
I did the whole thing. Like, I went and saw nationals every single day. So it was like gymnastics vacation for me. I was just surrounded by it. I really feel like it improved and fulfilled like more love for the sport in me. And I went to these live spotting clinics that they had. One was divided up into like floor and vault, if I remember correctly. And then Tammy Biggs was on the floor for leaps and beam. And I knew who Tammy Biggs was at that point because I'd watched videos of her many times and, you know, her drills videos and things like that. So seeing her in person was like pretty awesome. We got to spot the kids. But before that, it was kind of trial by fire, just watching videos, starting with very simple skills to spot. And then something interesting started happening. I started realizing that there are like thousands of ways to spot every skill, and it depends on what the kid is able to do. Like you could spot a back handspring in so many different ways based on what the kid needs help with in that back handspring. So that's something else I learned just kind of on my own. And that was really good for me because I developed all these different ways of, like, when I spot an error that I'm familiar with, I spot the kid this way. And I'm kind of developing a repertoire of spotting. And it's, you know, I find myself going back to that more and more now. And it's, you know, it's very useful. I also went to Woodward. I met you there, Chris. We had a lot of fun there.
Oh, what a week.
Yeah.
What a week that was.
It was a blast.
Yes.
And just, you know, I worked with my own kids there, but I was able to spot them in different ways because of the facility and the equipment they have. It's my first chance to use a trench bar system, which was awesome. So, yeah, that's my experience on spotting.
John, how about you? How did you develop your spotting skills over the long period of time? Just unmute yourself. John, are you there? All right.
I think,
oh, there you go.
oh, there we
You're
go.
good.
Okay. Am I there? Am I there?
Yep.
Yes, yes. Just your take on spotting and how you developed your spotting techniques.
Okay. Okay.
John, I hate to do this, but I'm having some issues with you. So I'd like to go to John, if you don't mind, can you sign out and log in again?
A little bit in high school, although I
Okay.
didn't do too much. When I started work, Bridge started teaching. Okay, go ahead. I will do that.
Yeah, because you're really spotting in and out. Coach Chris, what about you? Same question.
You're asking where I learned and how?
Yes, and how did you develop? How did you hone it?
Well, as far as it goes, I come from, just my background comes from the athlete that transitioned to coach. It was the first job that I ever had. It was about 14, and my coach said, Chris, you teach the boys to cartwheel, I'll pay you $10 for every cartwheel, right? So he incentivized it for me, right? and then he hired me. Worst mistake ever. But in all seriousness, I learned it's kind of a mishmash, an amalgam of James and I attended every single clinic possible for both men and women. I also have I have the advantage of being a little taller. For those of you who don't know me, I'm 6'4.5". So it's for me, it was more along the lines of, well, just throw a hand in there, and if she falls, you can grab her. It's no big deal. Or he, at first I started with boys. The point here is why my perspective is I kind of gathered, I consider myself a hunter-gatherer in that respect. I learned from some of the stuff I learned directly from John. I mean, John and I met in fact, John James and I met at the same spotting clinic years ago, 2012,
W200 in New Jersey. Yep, W200
Yeah.
New Jersey.
Oh my goodness, long time ago. But in any case, I wouldn't say that my experience or my gatherings in terms of spotting, in terms of technique anyway, comes all from one place. It's a mishmash. I am a huge YouTube guy when it comes to, there is such value. Instagram as well. I wasn't a huge Instagram person at first, but I've seen all kinds of interesting, new takes on spotting old skills. Most recently, I saw a giant on P-bars that was done by a Japanese coach that tied a piece of TheraBand around this gymnast's waist. And literally, as he swung up, this is parallel bars, men's parallel bars. He had him pull by the TheraBand so that he could catch him over the arm. It was just quite interesting. And me, I'm lucky in the sense that I don't get bored very easily. I can find interest in the most mundane things, and it drives everybody around me nuts. But how many times a day you'll hear me say, did you know that? Everybody will be like, oh God. But to wrap this up, my experience comes from any way, any possible manner I can gather this. But to keep sharp, I will close with this. Doing it over and over and over again, the way we train our gymnasts in muscle memory. I tell my gymnasts all the time, every single time you do a skill that I have to spot, you're practicing a skill, I'm practicing a spot. That's it has to be reinforced muscle memory wise. You cannot learn to swim at a library.
Spotting is very interesting for me because surprisingly, I never actually learned how to spot from anyone. My background was in martial arts, and when I started coaching gymnastics, I don't know why people just thought I knew how to do everything, and I knew everything. I don't know if it was the way I looked or my maturity or my confidence, but I just basically observed other people. And then when I would spot, I would just, maybe it's martial arts, I would just look for the center of mass, look for the direction of the force, spot the places that are safe and appropriate, and keep the athlete safe. And I've just kind of honed my skills based on that. And it's been rough. There were times when I didn't know what I was doing, and I kind of kept learning. And of course, you don't want to hurt an athlete. So, I've been lucky, knock on wood. I've never had an athlete get hurt spotting. So it's a long process. It is a long process. But I do believe the camps are great. I do believe trying to spot, athletes who are very good at skills, to kind of spot them because they kind of know what it feels like. One of my favorite stories is that I heard was that Kim Semesko was being spotted by Chris Burdett over Caroli's. And she was saying, oh, you're spotting me wrong. You're spotting me wrong. And Chris finally got mad and says, what do you mean I'm spotting you wrong? This is the exact same way Bella Caroli spot. And she said, I know he spots it wrong too, but I'm not going to tell him that. So, it's like, it's kind of funny. You could actually learn how to spot from the wrong person, the wrong technique. So I always directly talk to the athletes. I go to the athletes and I said, was that comfortable? Are you okay? Did you feel secure? And you want to get them through the safety and the skill. And then you create a rapport and a trust and a bond. And it's magical because there will be times when athletes will really only be spotted by you rather than other people. I mean, you have to kind of break that out of the confidence and then, get them to do it on their own, of course. And there are some coaches who are against overspotting. I've spoken to many beam coaches who think spotting is a no-no on beam. No. But I'm sorry, as bar coaches, I think it's a necessity to spot bars. Does anyone disagree? I really do think it is. Especially
I believe you will not be.
Fundamentals and shaping and safety, I think it is a necessity. And that's why coaches go in there. There was a story where Jennifer Say got injured, I think, at one of the national meets because there was no bar coach spotting her. And then they finally said, okay, let the coaches in, keep the athletes safe. So definitely there. I'm going to start moving on to another subject. We talked about spotting and stuff, but what happens if you're in a venue where you're working with lower level girls, lower level kids? You know, let's say maybe you're only dealing with XL silver, XL bronze. So you get complacent in coaching that level. Now, from my perspective, and this is the question I'm going to address to you, do you feel that coaches who only work at that level, because they don't see what's needed for the platinum or the higher levels like level 9, 10, they don't realize there are certain foundations and fundamental skills they should work on to progress towards that? Or do you find that all the coaches are on the same page? John, if you don't mind, unmute.
No, okay.
Great.
There's, I'm trying to remember exactly what the quote is, but if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So I think it's very important for those coaches at the lower levels or middle levels, see the advanced levels and see the kids doing those skills and where they're hoping to get their kids going to. I think it's important for the kids to see that also. If you have, you know, like if you have a gym, like at a certain level, like you only have like level 8s, it'd be good for them maybe to go see some level 9 meets, for example. But, you know, we're talking about the kids. But for the coach's standpoint, yeah, you got to know more than what you're actually teaching, I think. And even though you might not be teaching it yet, you're learning about it. You're learning how to spot it. You're learning all the little intricacies of it. And at the same time you're doing that, you're saying, that's why they want us to do the layout first and then twist, or really emphasize that aspect of it, or tap bigger on the jump, or whatever it is. Okay, because I think knowing the harder skill helps you understand the skill just before it and helps you prepare that skill better for what you want to do later on.
I definitely feel like gyms that have stronger, more established programs, their lower level staff definitely know what direction they want the gym. They have good guidance and stuff. And then of course, other programs, it's kind of a wing it, you know, just make sure Susie can do a back handspring. And one of the biggest complaints I always hear is that coaches teach the round off too early, they rush it, and they teach it incorrectly. And then basically it's just a process of trying to fix it over the next couple of years, you know? So that's something. Now, Aaron, you're taking over the head position at your new gym. How are you going to work with your staff and your other younger coaches to develop that kind of technique and that direction? What are your plans?
Just real quick, John, what did you want to say? You had your hand up.
Oh, John, sorry, yes.
That's okay. What all I wanted to say was, you know why? Because everybody, we all run into the same problem. Okay, yes. It's Susie's meet is next week. Okay, let her do it.
Yeah, get her the scale.
We got to get her in the meet. We'll fix it as we go, and you never have a chance.
Exactly.
Everybody, it happens to everybody, or has happened to everybody sometime in your life, and guess what? It's always going to happen because she's so good on everything else. We'll let it go.
Right.
You know, and then you run into problems later. But that's life.
Exactly.
That's all I wanted to say.
All right, Aaron, your turn.
So yeah, really, I've just been open to everything. Every time I've been in a new gym, I've learned so much from the kids there and the existing coaches in that program, and just through my own trial and error. So I'm trying to take all that knowledge that I have now, and, you know, SGA, Sterling Gymnastics Academy, that's where I'm at now in Michigan. And it's an established program. It's a fairly new program. It's about 5 years old, I want to say. But, you know, they had 5 years worth of the way they were doing things. So I always want to come in and boost the program, bolster the program. The last thing I want to do is come in and say, I'm changing this and this and this, and it's my way or the highway, you know. And a lot of the times, some of the things they were doing work really well and should not be changed. But, you know, it's a give and take. And if you really listen to the coaches that you work with and you communicate a lot, great things can really come from that, because everyone feels like they can share ideas with each other. And that's what's going to benefit the kids the most, because the kids have to get used to multiple coaching styles, but there has to be a backbone that all the coaches teach too, so that they can keep getting sent up through the levels, learning the correct way. But every coach has their own style and ways of teaching those things. So I think it's really valuable for the kids to have that difference, but also being on the same page. And that's a tricky balance, but that's what I'm in for.
Well, we really wish you the best of luck. That's very exciting. I mean, one thing we do have to remember that is that if you have a head coach or a coach that does the education for the other coaches, and if for some reason their style or their technique or their approach is not really beneficial, and whether it's emotional, physical, you know, it can affect the whole staff. And so you're basically creating more people who are going to teach in that manner or that nature. And right now, of course, as some of you may know, there was a documentary called Athlete A on Netflix. And one of the topics they talked about was the toxicity of coaches. You know, coaches who are using more of an abusive method, a rough method. You know, if something doesn't work, they get more frustrated at athletes rather than coming up with drills or different types of techniques. But one thing I've always been tried to do is try to like be a puzzle maker. If I can't get a girl to do a skill, I try to find a different approach, you know, a different method, a different logic to kind of figuring it. I remember still one time when I had a girl who was afraid of doing a back flyaway, a layout flyaway. She was terrified. She wouldn't do it. She wouldn't let go of the bar. No one could fix it. So I went into her one day and I just said, you know what, forget about it. Let's just have fun and let's do some pack timers. So I started teaching her packs, installing. I wasn't really teaching her pack, but, you know, telling her, you know, so I'd do drills on tramp and stuff. And I said, okay, let's just do a timer where you swing, let go, and just go to your feet. And what do you think she did? So then she competed her flyaway, and she came over to me and said, hey, you tricked me into doing a flyaway. That's not cool. You know, she said that to me, and, you know, Grace the Nunzi. So I loved it, you know. So I've always tried to think outside the box. So that's one of the techniques I've always done. Chris, I'm going to go to you, too. Had you find that there were things that you were taught as a gymnast that you definitely now see years later? Oh, you know what? I hate to say it, I don't agree with that methodology. I've kind of developed something differently. I think it was misguided. No names, though.
No, that's no problem. So just to clarify your question, are you saying, was I taught or did I experience things that I wouldn't employ myself?
Right. Things that you might have thought was correct back then, but as a developing learning coach, you're now assessing and doing something different.
Oh, many times, many times. I like to believe that the two most common mistakes that people make are A, underestimating the complexity of a situation, and B, overestimating their capability to handle it. And I would say that that's part of my track record. I tend to be able to think, well, that's not a problem. I'll be able to handle that when I come to it. You know, so what if I have to spot this and then develop this progression and then work with two separate groups of kids, head coach of one group, assistant coach on another group, and maybe sometimes a substitute with a third. I'll put it this way. In terms of coaching technique, I'd like to think that it is a continual process. Coaching is a learning process. You know, the quote is attributed to John Wooden, but it's actually, who knows where it came from, but it's attributed to John Wooden and a bunch of other people. But it goes like this. Success is never final and failure is never fatal. So is the way it goes, I like to think of coaching as a chess game. Many times you were talking about trying to make puzzles, trying to figure out what will work for an athlete that for some reason can't employ a technique or can't, you know, respond as well to a progression as some of their teammates might. So my whole idea is, in terms of coaching technique, I don't find that in my past I have many things that I was taught that I wouldn't employ simply because I, you know, disagree with how they're done. I believe I have found more streamlined and more efficient ways to employ this coaching technique, or I have found better ways that work for me in terms of spotting or progressing a skill. But as far as that works, I believe that the only real mistake you can make here is to I wouldn't say pretend, is to believe that you are finished learning. You're never done. It's never, if you're awake, you're learning.
It's ongoing.
You're never done with it.
Because,
so as far as that goes, I mean, there are certain techniques that my coach employed that I would never, you know, that I would never come from. But then again, I also had a coach that came from a hard Eastern Bloc background. And anybody who's in my circle knows, you know, is exhausted with the stories of my coach. But as far as that works, all I would say is the techniques wise, I wouldn't say there are bad and good. I would say there are safe and unsafe, of course, but more in terms of efficiency and being streamlined. The techniques that resound well with the coach and maybe don't resound so well with the coach. Alrighty, I'll end there.
No, definitely. Great points. A lot of people don't understand our sport is evolving. It's continually growing. There are changes in techniques, equipment, the code. So when I meet a coach, and I have met many coaches at the higher season level, I say, oh, when were you at the last Congress? I don't go to Congress anymore. They're social events, waste of time. Oh, did you read the new technique journal? Why should I know everything? I literally know upper level coaches who coach the highest levels at their gym, and they don't pursue any information. Now, can you imagine a doctor? No, I didn't read the newest journal on how to help heart disease. No, I just do what they did in the 70s. So I'm good. And a lot of people don't realize there is a high intrinsic risk involved in this sport. Now, I'm not going to be a name caller, but I've seen it happen. Coaches who think they're doing it right and the athletes suffer. So we want to avoid that. Coach James, do you feel that we do have a problem with older senior veteran coaches thinking they know everything? They're a little bit too much hubris, arrogance, and they don't feel like progressing?
Of course. It's just, I suppose it's only natural to become complacent after, perhaps decades of doing the same thing over and over again, right? The redundancy just such, you know what? I have a proven track record. XYZ works. That's what I'm doing because that's all I have to do, right? But you're absolutely right. Obviously it's a progressive sport. The gymnasts don't stop learning, right? Do they ever stop training a harder skill or trying to perform a skill better than the previous skill? So why should you, think that your coaching is finite in that regards? You have to be,
point.
yeah. And you have to be innovative too in your coaching. Once again, you have foundational spotting techniques or coaching techniques, but they evolve. And if they don't evolve, you should really check it because then something's not working right because it's only natural for it, to progress. It's not everything, but there are subtleties that come and go. And yeah, kind of going back to even what John said about being kind of stuck in one level, you need to see the big picture. And if you're a coach of only one or two levels, you need to see the big picture.
Even if you're just observing, I agree. You don't have to coach every level, but you should at least have a desire to learn and observe.
Right. You need to see where they're coming from, and you need to have a picture of where they're headed to and prepare for that. Prime example is as a men's coach, their compulsory is fairly simple. And a lot of the skills, a lot of the more even intermediate skills, they don't learn for, 2 or 3 levels beyond that. But doesn't mean that you hold off in coaching those skills. No, so you have to have the foresight to say, all right, you know what? Even though they got 2 or 3 years ahead of them, let's start training this now. They don't have to necessarily do the skill in its entirety, of course, but you start introducing little sections of it, right? And it might even be connected to some of the current skills that they're doing at their level. But yeah, it's like you said about doctors reading the journals. You have to be current. You have to know what's going on. It's only going to help you as to be a better coach.
Very good, James. Very good. And I hate to say it, but there was a time when I was a younger coach, and basically anyone who was like a level 10, 9 elite coach, I just thought whatever they said, it was mantra. And I remember I used to go like, oh, we do that? Okay, we do that. And then as I got more involved as a coach, I said, there might be a better way to do it. And then when I started becoming a higher level coach, and then I would go to national camps and clinics, I'd realize, you know what, that's not the right way, or it's not the best way. And then I started using my own techniques and style. Now, John, I'm going to go to you, and I'm hoping we're not going to date ourselves. But back when I used to look for gymnastics information, I had to check something called microfilm. I had to go to the library. I had to use the periodic table, and I'd have to find journals and magazines. And nowadays, you can just Google it or go, or go on YouTube. But back then, those articles and things were written by, experts in their field, PhDs, national staff members. Now, basically, anyone can post a YouTube video on how to teach a back layout. Seriously, anyone, right, John? No credentials, no nothing. So do you think in some sense, now that we have so much information, we're actually disseminating a lot of bad information. What is your opinion on that, John?
I think that is true in in some cases, and that's what I was mentioning earlier. I mean, as a coach yourself, you have to understand not just your athlete, you have to understand the mechanics of skills. Years ago, I was lucky enough to take a biomechanics course in college. And one of the stories they tell of a runner, a guy named Emil Zatopek, like a Czechoslovakian guy who ran distances. And everybody tried to do the same workout and the same physical training as him. And quite honestly, people were getting hurt. But he kept winning. But everybody else that tried to do what he did, they just got hurt. They were tearing muscles, they were beating themselves into the ground. And as it turned out, everything mechanically he was doing was incorrect. It was wrong. he was just such an animal, he could get away with doing it. So sometimes watching somebody do something and seeing them being successful, that's not the only clue you have. You've got to really take a look at what they're doing and say, yeah, maybe not, maybe you should go this way. The one thing I would note, though, that I'm seeing or that I'm not seeing now is all those old articles. When you go back, and like I said, I had a bunch here, but like Dr. George's thing I showed you has got like a list of references on it. Okay. And the old magazines, like the old Gymnast magazine, before it became International Gymnast, it was Gymnast magazine. The old USECA is actually still pretty good, but the technical stuff we got from Bill Sands and from Hal Halverson and all these other coaches that were on the national team, everything had that those credentials behind it. Okay, we don't see that now. Like I said, we see a videotape and, oh, hey, that was pretty cool. Let me try that. And that's why I think it's important for coaches to step back, try to understand everything going into it and everything that may come out of it. Not just the spotting, but the preparation, the technique. And is this something I want my kids to do or one certain kid? All right, I'm going to take one quick example. Bail handstand on bars, okay? And the swing, one arm, reach for the bar, put the kid on the bar. Excellent drill. I love it. It's fantastic. I've got some kids I would never teach that to. Because one, they're bigger than I am, or as big as I am. Okay, I'm not that tall. All right, and then I'm not going to be able to hold them up if something goes wrong. I know that. Okay, so I teach them differently. I just teach them to swing half turn, 45 on a stack. And I let them take their time working their way up to a handstand. I know they have to do it. But some of the little guys are learning it, and I can spot them easy, and they're going, whoop, they're starting to get it. So you have to understand where and what kid you can apply it to and who's it going to work for. And even some of those kids, they do it, but they're afraid. They hang on too long or whatever, so I do the other thing with them. So, I mean, you really got to be smart and looking. Aaron's got his hand up.
Yes, Aaron, please unmute yourself. Thank you, John.
I remember working with you, John, and Craig at ENA, how many bails I spotted every single day. I learned so many drills from you guys, and I saw firsthand exactly what John's talking about how just depending on the kid, you have to decide what series in the progression that they're going to do. And man, I remember after that first week, I was so sore.
No, it's a quintessential skill, but it actually has a high risk quotient. And so we must always keep that in consideration. So you always want to be able to assess your own self-assessment is one of the topics we talk about, whether or not you can safely spot. And one thing I've always been perturbed by, some coaches go, hey, do you want some extra help? And they're like, no, I got it. And other coaches will be like, hey, do you mind giving me some help spotting? And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking someone to help you spot. You know, I know some people feel like, oh, then it doesn't make me look like a good spotter. It makes me look bad. Then the kids will think less of me. I don't give a hoot what you think about yourself. keep the kids safe. That's all that matters. Keep the kids safe, progress on the skill, keep it quality. We got to remember that. So that's one of the other factors that we have. So I know,
John, I believe
I'm sorry,
James has a
yes,
question.
please. James.
James had his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick. John had a lot of great points. And I think one of the most invaluable things that you can do as a coach is to take a body mechanics class, course, whatever, just get some exposure to it. And it will blow your mind if you haven't done it. You will see, it's like the Matrix after you go through it. You do not see gymnastics with the same eyes. It's just, everything opens up. It's a whole new world, and things start to make sense to you, why things aren't working or why things work better this way. Having said that, the internet videos, you take it with a grain of salt. And I think depending on who they're taught by, they should be a supplemental material. And again, if you understand the body mechanics of the skill that you're trying to better understand, you'll better understand the spotting technique behind it and what may or may not be a good technique.
One of the biggest benefits I feel is going to state, regional, and national clinics. Those are usually hosted by organizations at that level. And lots of times what they'll do is they'll bring in very experienced coaches with tried and true methods. And then, of course, you bring your athletes with them to train. And I've definitely seen more and more of that happening, which really makes me happy because I really do think the camps and the clinics are nice. I'm not the biggest expert on like Woodward, IGC, and those types of camps. And I have to ask Chris and Aaron, because I know you guys have been to that, and I'm going to ask you for some frankness. I don't want to get you in trouble because you guys want to still work there. But do you find those camps have the same kind of technicality and progress that a regional or a national clinic would do? Or do you think they're more just kind of a more of a fun, skill-oriented camp? Chris, if you don't mind going first.
Sure. I like to use, and I highly doubt that I'm the first one to use this term, but I like to use the term skill mill. And it's not, it sounds pejorative in a sense. I'm really not trying to denigrate, Woodward or IGC. I myself had fantastic, times there. I met my current girlfriend there. We're 2 years in, and doesn't look like it's going to change at this point. I met Aaron there, and you meet some. Let me tell you, I'll say this much: I do believe there is value in meeting simply because of the exchange of information. You meet some great people. You have technique and progression that might have gone on a different path, something you'd never considered. And I love that. Personally, I am a gatherer of information, and I love being given something that, wow, I never thought of it that way. I never saw something like that. That, just to agree with James, I bought Jerry George's book, Championship Gymnastics, little plug for for Dr. George, who's also a professor. What I would say is you truly don't see gymnastics in the same way. So my whole idea here is there is a sort of caveat there, because there is a lot of, we talked about coaching ego before and things like that. You will meet, it's not as buttoned up because it is kind of a camp. It is, a portion of that is supposed to be fun for the kids. So you're not going to be on a very regimented path the entire time. But in terms of its value for, maybe picking up a skill as a coach, or picking up a progression as a coach that you might not have gone with, or learning a different spotting technique, or even a way to talk to a kid. Simply a way to talk to a kid. And I did that with a couple of Aaron's kids. And it's mind-blowing, the options and the paths that you can jump on. So I wouldn't shoot it down, but I will say there is a lot to be learned for coaches. If I were to recommend the national camps or anything like that, I would absolutely recommend that if you need to come back having learned something, I would absolutely say these state, regional, and national camps are where you want to go, simply because there is an agenda. They have masters of sport, people who have many times taken athletes to the Olympics. I would say I would prioritize that over any of the, like I said, the skill mills. And I'm sorry for how that might sound pejorative. Aaron, please.
Yeah, I think the main thing, in my point of view, is the environment. The environment is just really fun every day. It's just a positive environment. The kids are there enjoying themselves. The coaches are there enjoying themselves. But you also, through that, you meet a lot of really interesting people and a lot of really knowledgeable people. And it depends on who you talk to about what. Like I remember, like you have some of the Woodward staff that are there every year, right? And they are the ones that are always at their stations teaching the set things. But then you have like, Chris, you remember Tom Hamblin, right? Tumbling coach. He has tons of knowledge. I learned so much just from, he hosted like an hour-long twisting clinic one night at Woodward for the coaches one night. And it was like,
Yeah, he was one of our guests last week for trampoline. Great guy.
Yeah, it was very, very informative. And then you meet Olympians, you meet really high level athletes. I remember the entire like Danish power tumbling team was there. So just watching them, I was learning things just watching, like, wow, that's actually possible to do.
Well, it sounds like the camps are definitely fun, and not to date myself, but I think if you're a younger, enthusiastic coach, I think you'll have a blast. I really do. For us more veteran coaches, John, I don't really see us two hanging out at Woodward too often, unless we're the master coaches or the clinicians. Yes, James.
Yeah. So the Woodward camp, for instance, is they're athlete centric, right? It's all about them. It's not about the coach. And so in that regard, from a coach's perspective, like Chris said, it's a great time to build rapport with athletes and really learn how to interact and talk with in terms of what psychologically, what helps a student out, more, how do I talk to a kid to give them the confidence to perform a new skill or try a new skill or whatever.
With kids that don't know you.
Exactly. Right. And they're going at it, 8+ hours, and hats off to them. They're machines. But, conversely on the, the regional and the national things, they're coach centric. So, it's less attention from the students. The students are just bodies there to manipulate and there for the coaches to get their art practiced with. So it depends on what you want to accomplish. If you're, if you have a pretty good handle on things, take your kids to Woodward or IGC and just go through your motions and work them out. Try to hone them a little bit more. And but if you're learning it, if you're still kind of green, you got to definitely get the coaches.
What's great about those programs too is a lot of times if you're a visiting coach with your athletes, they will have a coach's track. So they will actually have coaching education, like you said, with Thomas Hamlin and stuff like that. So that's actually quite fascinating. And if you want to work there, you get paid to like learn and hang out. And like I said, I really think it's a great venue for the spotting, because when you go to the state, the regional, the national, and the special camps, most of the times you have expert coaches there, but they're doing more of the lecturing, the spotting, and the teaching. And you do work a little with your athletes, but it's not like you're in the gym 6-8 hours a day just spotting this and that. I mean, I definitely would say honing my skills at camp. I did camp for about 13 years. And I did a lot of spotting, and I definitely did hone my skills there. John, I'm going to go to you. As you know, we have something called Regional National Congress, and there are other organizations, and there's GAT and everything. But sometimes the format is more of what we call the text room or the textbook style, where you sit and you're kind of lectured. Do you find that format might be a little bit negative towards lots of learning new coaches, in the sense that maybe the topics are too esoteric, too advanced, the format is a little slow, it kind of goes over some people's heads? Or do you think that's still a good way to coach gymnastics? I mean, learn how to coach, John.
I think there's a balance with that. If you're going to learn spotting, you need to go hands-on. Believe it or not, years ago, I think I might have been one of the first coaches to do that type of lecture at a regional mini congress in Region 7. Because what I did was I brought videotapes of my kids doing all the drills that I was going to teach. So there was no confusion. We go video, we could run it back, we could show it. So everybody got to see it and understand it fairly well. And I think it was a hit, because I had like 40 people come up to me at the end of the lecture and they want a copy of that videotape, which I wasn't planning on doing. So it became a closet industry all of a sudden. Um, so I think in some instances that's really good. I do agree with you. Some of the lectures are too esoteric. Like before, I mentioned, like I had a class of biomechanics. All right, if you ask me right now, I can give you a single formula I would use for biomechanics. I couldn't read. I mean, very few. Force equals mass times acceleration. That's it. That's all I remember. Okay, but I remember the principles. I know how they apply to the skills and the kids that are doing them. And that's the thing. That's what if I hate to say, years ago we used to go to Bill Sands lectures and everybody would leave the room like, huh? What do you understand anything he said? And he actually got smart. At a certain point, he started dumbing it down a little bit more. All right. And it was funny because there was one time he finished a lecture, I went up to him, I said, Bill, I actually understood what you said. And he laughed. He said, yeah, I've been working on that. So it was really funny. But you don't need, as much as I was saying, you have all the references and stuff, you don't necessarily need all the science, but you need some of the science. You need some of the, at least the ideas and the principles and understanding how it works. And then, then you can play, then if you want to really get into it, you can play with the numbers. But most of the time, we don't need the numbers. We just need to understand what's going to happen at what point if the kids do this, that, or the other thing.
Thank you, John. And I have to admit, the current climate is wonderful. Coaches are definitely more accessible, of course, through the internet, emails. They're more willing to share. There are coaches who are constantly posting things. Tumble Track organization has ambassador coaches who post and go out and give information. Everyone is moving towards trying to give safer, better quality information to their coaches. I mean, it's definitely a different world when I first started off, trying to scrounge for as much information as you can. The articles, the books, the videos, the magazines. Now it's wonderful, but we still have to disseminate what is good and what is not so good. And we want to make sure that our younger, newer coaches are trying to strive to get that information, and that our more seasoned coaches are definitely keeping aware of trends and learning the new biomechanics of it. I mean, once again, there are a lot of people who still say that a lot of coaches out there are still doing it some of an archaic way, not looking at the athletes better. Some coaches don't follow periodization, which is a concept that a lot of things do. A lot of coaches, are rushing skills and not doing the correct foundation. And when you do that to an athlete, think about that. If that athlete becomes a coach, they're going to teach it also, rush through without the steps and everything. One of my athletes today was asking me, well, Coach John, I can just do the skill. Why are you making me do the drills again today? And I said, because you need to learn how to do the progressive steps, because if you get stuck or lost, you know what to do. And then that way you also become a better teacher. I'm going to do some final words. So we're going to end our lecture. Panelists, please stay on after we're done. So starting with Aaron, what would you say has been the most beneficial things to you as a coach learning more things? What was your favorite thing? Go.
Totally just becoming better at being self-aware of what I'm doing when I'm coaching. I think that is the number one key to going into change with a positive mindset, because sometimes when you get humbled, when you learn something new that goes against what you've been doing, it hurts a little bit, right? It feels kind of uncomfortable, but then you have to reflect on it and you have to reassess and look at it neutrally as best you can, and then decide if it's better for you to try it or maybe take some of that, and put it towards what you're doing, or just change it entirely. And you have to be aware of how you're interacting with the kids. If I'm in a moment where I'm kind of getting intense, I can now realize that and pull back. And I think that's really important for controlling yourself as a coach and not becoming one of those abusive coaches that's always yelling, or, no, you're staying on the beam until you do your back handspring, and then the kid's on the beam for an hour crying and not getting anything out of it. So being self-aware and then reflecting on that and learning that's how I've become better at the art of coaching and like relaying the information to the kids better. And that's still to this day the hardest part of coaching for me. Because like we've said many times in this discussion, you could go into so many different resources and find out how to spot or like how to progress a certain skill. But being in the trenches and doing the coaching with many different kids over years and years, that's something you can only get through experience. So
Exactly. And our interaction with the children is going to be one of the biggest key things that people are watching. How we communicate with them, whether we treat them with respect, with propriety, it is critical. Right now, everyone is under scrutiny in the microscope. So please be aware of that. That's very, very wise words, Aaron. Coach James, final words and your statement?
Yeah, so get a technical foundation for yourself if you don't have one already. Be versatile. Be, what's the word I'm looking for? Innovative, right? You don't want to get stuck in one way. You don't want to spot one way because it may not work for all the kids. And I found that when you introduce your spotting, say the same skill, you introduce a different way of spotting it. Sometimes the gymnast is like, whoa, what are you doing? Relax, I'm still spotting you through the skill. And it also gives them a different, kind of mindset or view of, all right, well, it's not, they don't get that comfort zone that they might get, over and over again, or, oh, well, Coach Dan doesn't spot me like that, or, it's, so they get used to that difference in spotting. And also, yeah, I think in this day and age, you can't get mad at the kid. I mean, if an adolescent is getting you pissed off, once again, just take a break, take a couple of deep breaths and realize what you're doing this for. And
it's not worth getting mad.
Exactly, right? And it's about the longevity of the sport, about the longevity of the gymnast, right? So once again, going back to your spotting techniques and your coaching techniques, think about how what they're doing today will impact them down the line, whether it's next season or 3 years from now. You have to kind of be aware of what you're doing. And one final note in that regard, everything you do should be done for a reason. So if it's, if you're getting pissed off and you want to condition the hell out of them for some reason, I don't recommend that, right? But there's got to be a more technical reason for it. Like, don't just give them push-ups for doing something that's not going to help them in any way, right? Have them do a particular skill in more positive light that will be towards a betterment of the skill that perhaps they were, quote, messing up on. So, but again, they're kids, so you gotta relax when you coach. Have fun.
Very good.
Yeah. Lost
Chris,
your audio.
final words, comments, and what things you'd like to impart. Unmute yourself, please.
Sorry about that. As far as that goes, I lost your audio for a quick second. I will close by saying this: scientia potentia est. It means knowledge is power. The more you know, the better you will be, and ultimately, it will win out that way. One thing I will say, and I just wanted to drop this very fast because we didn't cover it during our discussion. When it comes to competitive gymnasts, one thing I've found that goes totally against everything that we're taught, at least in the first part of, Coaching 101. Avoid the compliment sandwich. I like to call it the expletive sandwich. I say this specifically from a psychological perspective. It's okay for class kids, but use sparingly for team kids. And I say it this way because it conditions them to be suspicious of initial praise. That was really good. And those kids will always be listening and waiting for the but. The idea here is constant relying on on this sandwich reduces the weight or the meaningfulness of praise, especially when the athletes conquer a big hurdle or something that they've been, working a long time obstacle. So one of the things I would like to say is it's not something that you need to completely avoid. I would say do not use it as a crutch because especially as your athletes get older, when you get those 9 and 10s, you don't have to, let's say, kiss their feet and say, oh, that was really good, but they'll understand the purpose of constructive criticism. All I would say is I see a lot of coaches do this. They rely on they figure, well, how am I going to fit this into the compliment sandwich? I don't call it the compliment sandwich for a reason. And remember, knowledge is power. Scientia potentia est.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I mean, my gymnasts know that I'm passionate and I care a lot. So when I do give comments and criticisms and corrections, they know it's from the heart. I don't need to falsify with the compliment sandwich as some people are fans of. John, final words, lead us off. Things you think are the most beneficial for coaching developments, things that you would recommend, and your final statement.
All right. Quite honestly, the one thing we talked about a little bit earlier, keep going to congresses, keep going to clinics, keep going to training camps, keep learning. I mentioned this to you a little bit earlier this week. We were talking, and last year I was at Congress and I went to one of Tom Foster's lecture, and he sees me sitting before he started. He sees me sitting and says, "What the hell are you doing here?" He said, you know all this stuff. I said, yeah, but I mean, you're going to come up with something new, and I want to know what the hell it is. All right. And if you stop and think about it, now I can't think of his name. Shoot.
That's all right.
Male gymnast. I can't think of his name. Anyway, 1999 Worlds. He lost the bronze medal by 0.001. Blaine Wilson.
Right,
Blaine Wilson lost the bronze by 0.001. That is how competitive our sport is nowadays. So if I go to a lecture and I'm listening and I've heard 95% of it before, but there's a new 5% that somebody's come up with, or they've, in their research, they've studied something, they found this or that I might be able to use. That might give me that little edge. Okay, so, or give me new ideas to do with the kids in my gym. So, always be studying, always be going, looking, watch the videos, read the books. And another thing I'm going to say, and we haven't mentioned this, is you got to dream a little. You got to be able to look at something or somebody and see, wow, maybe this kid has some potential to do this skill. Okay. Or, hey, this is a different way of doing this. I wonder if it works. Okay. Or something.
Oops, you're breaking up, John.
One last thing real quick. I had a kid years ago, a double back, and she was having trouble with it. She would go up, but didn't quite open the hips all the way, short in rotation, always landing a little short. All right. And then finally I went over and I talked to her. I said, you know what? I figured this out. You're like the guys. You got to punch the floor longer. And I walked away and I let her, and I'm like, what the hell did I just say to her? Okay. And she nailed it. And she was like, hey, you're right. It works. It was just something to get her to stretch a little more off the floor, and it worked. So don't be afraid to dream or to experiment or to try things. Say silly things. That makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense to hold back sometimes if you've got a good idea. Okay? And if it's not a good idea, you'll find out about it quick enough.
Definitely, John. Those are wonderful words. And as coaches, remember that we're all trying to help each other. Don't be afraid to ask another coach's opinion. Sometimes coaches like to give help and other coaches think that it's a negative statement on them, but it is not. We're all in the same job together. And I'll be honest, I wish more coaches would say stuff. I would love that. I would love more judges to say stuff at meets and everything. Let's bring our community together, put the egos, check them at the door, and then kind of work more together. I mean, that's what we do online. I would have to say definitely keep the journals, the magazines, keep reading articles, follow the biomechanics, the physics and everything. Go to your state. I know some gyms, owners won't pay for your education. Then reach out to mentors. There are a lot of coaches and owners of gyms who do mentorships. That means you can come to their gym. I've had many people come to Magma and visit, and I love it. And I've gone out to gyms and visit, I've been out to Woga, I've been to North Stars, I've been to ENA. I love going out, So keep doing that. And I have to say the two things that I found to be the most beneficial is I love the camps. not the athlete camps, but the coaches camps, like the double 400, the W300, the Make It Right camps, the Tops camp I've been out to, you know, the national camps, if you can get access. And don't be embarrassed if you call USAG and said, may I come as an observation coach? They will grant you access in some camps, even if you don't have any athletes. And the next thing I love is go visit gyms. You know, I love to visit gyms, you know, see what gyms are doing really well, give them a call, you know, be a fly on the wall, you know, study and watch the coaches. You know, I love going down, and lots of times they're very accommodating. They're very open. So once again, thank you so much to my esteemed panelists for joining us on Coaches on Couches 12, July 2nd, 9 to 10 p.m. We had a wonderful discussion on the coach's road to learning, education, assessment, and developing. All four of these coaches, and myself including, are still learning. Come by to Congress, you'll always see me. I've been going to the national congresses for over the 20 years, and I always see John up there with his little camera videotaping, and I'm like, John, what are you doing here? But I love it, and these guys come with me too, so I love it. And it's a great social venue because it's a coaches convention. You know, the compulsory clinic's going to be out in Reno and Atlantic City. Guess what? I'm going to go to it. I've been coaching compulsories for 25 years. I'm still going to go to it because I just love to learn. I love to learn and, like I said, socialize. So once again, thank you, John Wochuk, ENA. Thank you, Aaron Minsky from SGA. Thank you, Coach James and Chris Ostra from Magma. And thank you to everyone who's been here. On behalf of myself and all the guests on Coaches on Couches, have a wonderful 4th of July weekend. Have a wonderful time. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. And you guys kind of hang on
Thanks,
so I can
guys.
chat a little. Yeah, you guys, panelists, stay on so I can chat a little bit with you guys. But everyone else, thank you so much, and have a good day. Once again, thank you for being on Coaches on Couches, episode 12, July 2nd, 9 to 10 p.m. Episode 12, The Coach's Road to Learning, Education, Assessment, and Developing. Our panelists included John Wochuk, Aaron Saminsky, Chris Ostra, James Teichman. Right here, we have a quick top 10 non-technical pet peeves among coaches. Once again, this is only my own personal opinion, so please realize that for some people, it may be a little bit different. Tardiness and always late. Coaches try to avoid that. Eating and drinking on the floor. I actually did a poll once with my gymnast, and I asked them, what's the thing you hate the most about coaches or what they do? And they said, eating and drinking while we're working our butts off. It does not make them happy. Excessive sitting while coaching. I mean, of course, health reason and age is one thing. If you're all sitting together, that's another thing. But being a armchair coach, not the biggest thing. Being on your phone or chatting with other friends or coaches instead of watching your students or class. Excessive breaks or bathroom, unless maybe they have some kind of bladder issues. Not staying on time rotation. One of my biggest things. Oh, give me 5 more minutes. She almost has that skill. Almost has that skill. Not properly cleaning or moving your mats, leaving them. We set up a station for bales and go, let the class coaches move that. Never, ever screw with the class coaches' rotations. A lack of passion and enthusiasm. Sometimes coaches do get burned out. Blaming kids for mistakes. That's a big no-no. You know, if you're the instructor, you're the guide, you're the captain. You have to make sure you do it right. And one that was added by some other coaches, focusing on only one child or skill and ignoring the rest. A couple of statements that were also sent to me is putting down other coaches. We want to be very professional and avoid that. I've actually seen that happen where a coach does a skill. Another coach will actually come over and berate the skill in front of the students. Please, coaches, never, ever berate another coach in front of the students. You want to speak to them in private on the side, please do so. But we need to really stick together and focus together. We are working together in this field. Next weekend, Coaches on Coaches number 13 returns back to Friday, July 10th, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Beauty and the Beam. We're going to talk about basically acro level skills and progressions on beam with Tammy Biggs, Mary Lee Tracy, Christy Phillips, and Tammy Salciano. This is going to be a wonderful clinic. A wonderful episode. It's going to be almost better than a clinic. So please join us next weekend for that. So once again, thank you. Have a wonderful 4th of July, and we'll see you next time.